What is the definition of an eating disorder from a dietitian's perspective?
Don't feel it's black and white. I feel like there's definitely the realm of anorexia, and there's definitely the realm of bulimia. There's definitely the realm of binge eating. Those are all the ones you're going to find in the diagnostic codes, okay? Orthorexia is a new one, which is the addiction to perfect eating. There's also this space called that they term disordered eating. I feel more people have disordered eating than normal eating. So it's really hard for me to tag that there's one state of eating disorder or there's one type of eating disorder. A lot of my people who've done it long enough, they'll go from both spectrums of restriction to binge, whether they purge or not. They're all over the board. So I don't really get people who are just in one spot.
That makes sense.
Right? And I feel like the mindset is so common often between disordered eating individuals and those who do have behaviors. So that's why I come from this space where I see all of it. And so it's really hard for me to just be like, okay, you are this and you are this and this is what you need, because it flows.
But what are the main types you think that college students in particular are most vulnerable to?
People ask me all the time, do you see more anorexics? Do you see more bulimics? In a college atmosphere, it's about even. Some of them who've been doing it longer have both. And lots of them I meet with, they'll go in patterns of both. So I have several right now that they'll go in this restricted pattern for quite some time. The body can't handle it. They eat for survival. But then that tips them over the black and white thinking edge. And so then they overconsume. And then we play the game. So I feel like both of those are very prevalent. The orthorexic, I don't get to see as much because typically they're still in denial. Because we're being good and we're being healthy. And it's not until that becomes like so anxiety provoking that it causes more mental health and more social issues that I will get those. Binge eating, I get a handful. But between the big dogs of anorexia and bulimia, it's close enough to be even, I think.
Okay. So you mentioned the black and white mindset.
Yes.
Can you go further into what that is?
That's the crutch of all of this problem, okay? So that style of thinking connected with overachieving, people-pleasing, perfectionist, those are the group that I get. Minds that don't shut off well, minds that like order, minds that are always driven and pushing. When it gets tipped into there's only one right way or right answer and then the other one is obviously wrong, that's when everything falls apart.
Achieving people. But are there other demographic or gender aspects that play into this?
Good. So typically everyone I work with has the tendency to have an anxious mind, which is a very worrisome, very busy mind, okay? So then a lot of those other ones come into play. The outlying ones, that's by far my bulk. The outlying ones would maybe be pressure from family when they were young, coaches when they were young, if there's been traumatic events that have occurred or abuse. Sometimes that's a coping thing to counter that doesn't necessarily play with just your mindset, like it was sparked by something else. Sometimes I get just more chronic emotional eaters that don't know how to cope with life without food. So those would probably be the clientele that goes outside of that other mental bracket. They might not be those things, but they just don't know how to have a relationship with food because that is how they cope with pretty much everything.
And do you think that can start in college because it's a new stressful time?
Yes. And that one's more both gender. I feel like I've had a handful of male eating disorders over the years. I would say maybe 8 to 10 total in my almost 20 years of doing this. So I mean it's there but not great. But the binge eating, the genders are kind of about equal.
So this is mostly a female thing that tends to occur?
For those who seek to get help in this university and this culture, that is what I have seen. I don't know if there's a stigma about getting help as an adult male, or if they're not there yet, or I don't know. I would assume there's way more out there, but I just don't meet with.
Right. So maybe it's that they're just not reporting it, not that they don't have it.
Or that this place of the world, it isn't as high in the male demographic as others might be.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about a history of food insecurity? Do you think that could play a part in this?
And I met with a professional on campus who's referring someone to me that grew up in an environment financially that they did not sometimes have enough food for the family. And they now live in an environment here where there is meal plan options and there's so much food, and so they're tipping the scale because of probably these deep scars from when they were younger of where's my next meal going to come from. So another girl I worked with today that we brought it up, she has issues grocery shopping because it creates so much drama of what is perfect and right and good and bad, and it's toxic for her to think that many choices, right? So she avoids it. Well, we are having the hardest time having her have a secure relationship with food because we don't know where it's going to come from.
Yeah.
So food security, I feel, is layered so deep in the human psyche about your relationship with food. Whether that's, I don't know if I'm going to get enough because my siblings are going to take it all, whether that's we don't have food, whether that's I don't know how to set up a system to get my own food. But it's weird sometimes the extremes that the mind goes to when it's afraid of where's my food coming.
It's an interesting link, especially with hunger in the world, like how it could play.
I can't even imagine your relationship. Well, they did this really cool study, but they did a study where they took and put them in this isolated space where they could observe their behaviors, their mood, their cognitive abilities, personality, stuff like that, on a pretty standard baseline calorie intake. Then they took a control group and another group and they cut the calories in half.
Oh, wow.
For an extended period of time, so they could truly observe the difference.
Right.
And then the rebound from when they got to eat again created all kinds of different dynamics. Some became chefs because they were so obsessed with food. Others had binge eating issues. Some had impulsive. And then they also did a ton of studies from World War II, like concentration camps, and like when people were refed, what was their relationship with food? Because their food insecurity is something we'll never understand.
Right.
But yeah, so I do feel like it's super real. But yeah.
What do you think the major consequences are socially for people that have a poor relationship with food?
Isolation's a big one. Social anxiety because they're anxious of a food moment going awry. They're anxious of choices they might have to make.
Right.
They oftentimes, most of my clients, their anticipation is so much worse than the actual event that they will freak themselves out before anything even happens, and it's not that bad, but they don't want to do it because of what they've envisioned. Or they'll live two lives. I feel like a lot of college students live two lives anyway.
If we think a friend or peer or family member has an eating disorder, what's the best way to reach out without being insensitive and without making it worse?
And it's going to completely depend on their stage of change. Okay? So you might get totally shut down. You might just plant a seed and they get mad at you and they tell you to back off, mind your own business. Or you can be finally you reached out, so now I feel open to talk to. So just be prepared for the whole gamut. You have to wait until they're ready, though. And sometimes it has to kick their butt hard enough, and you can't convince them that it's hurting them. Like, it kind of, they have to get to the point where it hurts them. So sometimes you have to kind of watch it for a little while, which is heartbreaking. But this is the one thing that, like, you can't just abstain from. Right. You have to work through. And so if you're not in a place where it's worth it to work through it, you'll probably avoid it. Things you can do, though, is just mention, like, I statements. They say to use those a lot, not like, what are you doing to your body? I have just noticed this, and I'm nervous for you. I'm afraid that you're not happy. That type of thing. Definitely put it on an I statement observation. And then, would you like me to help you find resources? Is there a place where you would just like to talk to me sometimes? Is there an open, non-judge space where you can just let me know things? Do you know, you just more than anything, I'm your friend, and then I'm here to help you if you need it. Sometimes you might even say, here's a book, some self-help, like mind positivity or relaxation or meditation things, or anything to just get their brain in a more positive space, even if it's not directly related to the eating disorder, if they're not ready to challenge it. And one of the best things that I can think of you can do to help prevent or to set a tone around your own life is how you discuss health and food and your body in front of others. and especially in a college demographic, because it's this free space to talk and think and say how I want, there's this epidemic of fat talk or body talk, where it's totally socially cool to talk about my body and to call it fat and to pick on parts of it in a social circle. All that does is totally feed an eating disorder mind. Big time. So I feel like as a friend and someone who cares about someone, avoiding food talk, the way you converse about how you exist with your body and food can set a tone, because it's not going to be the norm. And I come across kids who, like, their parents are sometimes the worst fat talkers in their life. And I feel like that's another issue we have. The generation coming up has been raised by diet. There's a lot of imprinting.
So what are some resources that we can find on campus to direct people to?
Okay. The problem is we are so maxed out. So if you do need resources, my biggest tip would be get it at the first of the semester. Myself, Counseling Center, CAPS, has dietitians or therapists that are good with eating disorders. There's also therapists within the health center that meet. There are physicians here to help with any physical needs, any like menstruation issues, because sometimes those go along with it. If there's need for medication to help with mental health. And the services are very inexpensive or free. Like, it's the best way to do it. Unfortunately, sometimes our schedules are maxed. So those are available. The problem that you're getting, though, CAPS is becoming so full that sometimes if you're a longer term need, they'll refer you to people in the community.
Back to the idea of just changing that mentality. I think that could be huge.
I think the culture is huge. Anything you're involved in, if you could create a different culture, I feel like that's where the grassroots has got to start.